The instruction manual's been thrown out the window. See below the instruction manual for how the Homo sapien, which was released by Natural Selection Incorporated millennia ago, see how it applies, see if it would work for you now, and see the problem we're all having. Suitable for tribes of 30 to 40 persons, no larger. Must be kept interconnected with deep emotional ties. Recommended use. Keep a natural green environment with prolonged exposure to natural light. Homo sapiens grow restless if kept shut off for long periods of time. Features. Inbuilt threat detection. Will react with excessive fear in the face of minimal threats in order to avoid danger. Also designed to pursue status in order to promote greater mating odds. Subtypes. The male and female subtypes are designed to complement each other. Male type has larger physical frame and with programmed more risk-taking tendency, suited for hunting. Female subtype more socially attuned and affectionate to facilitate child rearing. Recommended shelf life, no more than 30 years maximum. The poor people at Natural Selection Incorporated. They have no way of updating their fleet of Homo sapien brains. There is no facility to update them fast enough. Natural Selection Incorporated is a company whose methods and technology is continually falling behind. It's not as noticeable to the fleet of Homo sapiens, as their lifespans at 80 to 100 years remain too short to notice this shift on a larger historical perspective. They're resigned to watching their latest model of brains struggle to adapt to a world that evolves much faster, dealing with wear and tear, stress and strain that such brains were not designed to handle. Welcome to the With Joe Wehbe Podcast. That was a reading from my blog, the With Joe Wehbe blog, on the widening gap between these parts of ourselves. We've been talking about the war that's been raging for 70,000 years. This war that's happening inside our brains and is reflected most powerfully out in the world as our canvas for it all. And what we were just discussing is the fact that, well, our brains don't really update that fast. If I were to hold this up, this thing I read out of my tablet, this will get a prompt for a software update every so often. And its little brain gets updated over time. Now, I know that they are very clever with these products, that they do try and make a new and greater one. If it's Apple, it's every year normally, and it's a pretty good business model, but I always scratch my head because I think the software updates and it seems pretty functional over time. But our brains, as we just read, are not quite like that. There's no automatic software updates for our brains or even our minds. It's a very manual process updating your mind. And again, you'll see why we start this podcast. The first big series is on how we're wired. We're trying to update our brains to survive in the world we've created for them to live in, because this model was not designed for this time. The world changes faster and faster. We have an environment that conflicts a lot of the time with those instructions, with that instruction manual. The instruction manual has been thrown out the window. It's like using the wrong toy or the wrong car for the wrong purpose. Ignoring the intended use, using it for something else. And that's essentially what we're doing with our brains. So how malleable are we? And how stuck are we? Well, a book, once everyone buys a book and it's out there, the book can't be changed, right? It's print. It's been written and it's locked in. And if the author wants to change the message in the book, he's got to do a whole new edition. Now, I don't think I would describe our brains or our minds as quite being like that. They're not locked in. We're somewhere in between. You know what I think we're like? I think we're like, I've got this old GPS, so now I just use my phone nav in the car. Google outperforms my old nav. But my old nav, which I still have in the car pocket, plugged in, it worked pretty well, but it didn't get an automatic update when the constellation of the bloody streets changed, when a new road opened or traffic conditions changed or a no right turn was added. I was supposed to plug it into the computer and get the updates. It was a manual update process. And if we kept doing that, it would stay up to date. Problem is, I was always too lazy to update my old GPS. I let it collect dust, and now I leave it there and neglect it. Neglect it kind of like if anyone's seen Toy Story 2, like Mr. Squeaker, just left on a shelf, hidden away, collecting dust. And I outsourced GPS to the phone, which I'm recording on now. The technology we create does amazing things these days, and it will continue to do so. Problem is, we can't really afford to treat our brains like Mr. Squeaker or like my old GPS. If we sit there letting them collect dust and not bothering to update them, we're using them on roads to get places they're incapable of going, and they're going to lead us into oncoming traffic. There are no automatic software updates for our brains or our minds. We're the ones who have to update them very deliberately. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not listening to it, if you're listening to it out of a drive to learn and challenge your thinking, then you're already on that. You're already on that journey. There's only two things you could possibly be interested in doing: maintaining that, not necessarily just by listening to me, but reading and learning in general, especially about yourself and how you're wired. And two, keep trying to optimize and compound that learning. Try and turn up, and we will dedicate a whole series to that, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. For now, you can check out more on the blog at www.withjoewehbe.com and just /blog, and all the podcast episodes go up there as well, and the corresponding post for this, for today's conversation. Apart from that, I should remind you every now and then to go back to the start. If you've come in here as a one-off, just remember that these episodes are all made in a very specific order, the order I believe they're best consumed to help you get the most out of these ideas. But apart from that, I think it's very easy to know what we can all implement. I know I need to implement this always myself. Going forward is to keep the learning journey going, to bridge the gap. We're going to talk about how crucial that gap is and how big that gap is, and the biggest problem with that gap in the next episode. But for now, just remember to use this for the benefit of not just yourself, but information that can enlighten others. Because the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others. This has been the With Joe Wehbe podcast. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow.